Hey there guys, I am the Sixth Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. So with the rumours swirling of an upcoming Custodes and Genestealer cult box and a codex for each in December, I wanted to take a quick moment to have a bit of a general overall look at the basic Custodes statline and rules, because I kind of feel like in a world with not only Deathwing and Death Guard Terminator durability, but also 60 shot auto wounding on 6's AdMech gun lines, D3 plus 3 damage Dark Lances, not to mention just a general improvement to firepower in most armies across the board, that the regular Custodes profile might not quite cut it anymore unless they get a few tweaks in their new codex. I mean, to be fair, their basic profile is a very good one. Strength 5, Toughness 5, 3 wounds, 3 attacks, a 2-up save, a 5-up invuln, which goes to an even nicer 4-up if you have your detachment special bonus rule in effect, the Emperor's Chosen. But even with all that, are individual Custodian guards worth the 45 points per model which you currently pay for them? And to start, I'm just going to get this out of the way because it's kind of like pulling off a plaster. It will just be better if I do it quickly. I think that the Emperor's Chosen ability is going to change. I think that GW have shown us that they really don't want 3-up invulnerable saves to be in any way spammable, and Custodes are currently one of the only factions that you can get a huge number of 3-up invuns on. So I do think that that rule is 100% going to change in the new codex. And so this immediately puts the standard Custodian to a 2-up armor save and a 5-up invuln, or a 1-up armor save and a 4-up invuln if they have a storm shield, much like a standard Space Marine Terminator. And like a standard Space Marine Terminator now, they both now have the same 3 wounds, which from a model size and a fluff perspective definitely still feels very off to me. The Toughness 5 is nice, of course, but I still would not be at all surprised to see GW take the step of pushing the Custodians up to 4 wounds each, and then things like the Custodian Terminators and the Bikers up to 5 wounds a pop. That would very nicely set them above and apart from regular Marines, and funnily enough, from a gameplay perspective, it actually sets them up in something of a similar place as they are now against heavier -3 and -4 AP style weapons, las cannons and melter and that sort of thing. A las cannon Devastator squad will roughly kill a single 3 wound 4-up save Custodian, 4-up invulnerable save should I say, and equally a standard las cannon Devastator squad will roughly on average just about kill a single 4 wound 5-up save invulnerable Custodian. So in my mind, it's quite a good move from GW in terms of creating that clear, separate boundary between profiles for the Marines and even elite Marines like Terminators and the best of the best in the form of the Custodians, whilst still leaving them at a more or less similar position when it comes to their durability against heavy weapons. Obviously against the light armors fire, that extra wound is a massive boost, but I do honestly feel that GW will give them that extra wound at the expense of the +1 invuln from the Emperor's Chosen as a way to make them look different profile wise, but more or less keeping them in a similar spot based on just those parts of their rules. But in spite of that, I do think that GW will need to do something to boost the Custodes to help them to survive on the battlefields of 9th edition, especially at their very expensive points cost. So whilst I do think the Emperor's Chosen ability is going to change and not give the +1 invuln anymore, I do think it is going to still be there, and I have a few ideas for what it might do in their new codex. The first idea I had is one that I'm actually personally very keen on, and that is, what if GW decide to combine or adapt in some way the Emperor's Chosen rule with another rule that the Custodians have, which is the Aegis of the Emperor special rule. And instead of just giving the 5-up invuln and a 6-up to ignore psychic mortal wounds, they change it so that these rules now combine to just give the 5-up invuln as it has done before, and a flat, no nonsense 5-up shrug in every situation. So yes, they did take shrugs away from armies like the Death Guard, but I do think that if we're being honest, even a Death Guard army can bring a lot more models to the table than a Custodes army can, and numerous rolling of shrugs for different damage profiles and different weapons on, 10 Plague Marines is a lot more time consuming and a pain to keep track of compared to 3 or even 5 Custodian Guard. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if GW decided that for such a small, elite, low model count army, that extra level of bookkeeping in keeping track of the shrugs and doing the shrugs against enemy attacks isn't too unreasonable to give to the custodians. It won't really create that much extra work for the players. It won't really take up that much extra time. And in compensation, it would give the custodians a huge boost to their durability, not just against 1 damage weapons, but all the way up to the D3 plus 3 damage weapons that are plaguing the game at the moment, and especially if the custodians come with their new and improved 4 wound profile, it will be a really good rule to help them fight through and survive even the harshest of enemy firepower, which is really important when you have so few models on the board. And what I really like about the idea of this being the Custodes rule as well is that it really will help to balance out the innate swinginess that having a very low model count force can bring. With armies like Custodes and also Terminators, just a few unlucky ones can absolutely ruin your game in just one shooting phase or one fight phase, and with that shrug to back them up, it would sort of level out the curve of potential bad luck, which I feel impacts armies like Custodes much more so than other armies like Guard or Tyranids or even Orcs. The next idea that I had that I also really love, and which we have seen before in the Harlequins with their Shield of Harm, or Shield from Harm should I say, aura, is a rule that effectively means that their enemy has to subtract 1 from the wound rolls against your models when they're attacking them. I would possibly change this slightly so that instead of you just subtracting 1 from the wound rolls, the enemy has to subtract 1 from the strength of the incoming attack. That isn't quite as powerful as just a flat -1 to wound, which I do feel would possibly be a little bit obnoxious. It would push things like lasguns to wounding on 6s, heavy bolters to wounding on 5s, and then even the really strong strength 10 stuff back to wounding on 3s instead of 2s. And what I do like about this is that it wouldn't be effective against everything, but like we saw with the snake bites for the orcs, it would just give your Custodes that bit of extra protection against certain values of weaponry that could be targeted against your units. And I would argue that it is overall maybe a little bit more difficult to keep track of, in my mind anyway, than just the 5-up shrug. But I do think it is quite a nice solution for helping keeping your Custodes safe against specific strengths and specific weapons, but not just giving them a blanket really powerful rule like a flat -1 to wound would. Essentially, subtracting 1 from the damage rolls of weapons would mean your Custodes would get more durable against strength 3, strength 5, strength 6 and strength 10, which isn't the amazing magic number of including strength 4 and strength 8, but it's not a bad set of values to have a buff against. The final 2 options that I had considered as a way to buff the durability of the Custodes are actually taken from the current list of Custodes stratagems, and I thought that maybe one of these could get repurposed or rewritten into the Custodes army-wide rule. And first up, I was looking at Auramite and Adamantium, which currently allows you to just flat out ignore -1 or -2 AP. And this is a brilliant stratagem. It's absolutely fantastic for keeping your guys alive that little bit longer, and it would go a long way in keeping your Custodes on the board against that low strength, minimal AP, but high rate of fire weaponry, things like bolt rifles to heavy bolters to onslaught Gatling cannons. It does have the downside, of course, that it does nothing against AP -3 or above, which does lead to some genuine feels bad moments if your opponent is shooting at your Custodes with nothing but las cannons and melters and even things like heavy bolt rifles in Tactical Doctrine. This does nothing to help improve your survivability against them. So my idea for this stratagem was to make it the new version of the Emperor's Chosen, but instead of just ignoring AP-1 or AP-2, you just reduce enemy attacks against your units by 1 AP. So that would mean that you are getting your 2-up save much more regularly, and even things like las cannons are now only bringing you to your 4-up armor save instead of pushing you to your 5-up invuln. I do like that this version of the rule, or this rewording of the rule, would mean that it is effective against AP-1, AP-2, and AP-3. Now, obviously, stuff like AP-4 in this situation would still just bring you to your 5-up armor or invuln, so it doesn't make a big difference in that situation, but perhaps more theory crafting, since we're here, so why not? They could keep the Oromite and Adamantium stratagem and just reword that so that when you use that stratagem, you get to reduce the AP by 2 instead of just 1. So for a unit, for a phase, you could give it to them, and things that were being shot at them, like Dark Lances or Melter, would still only push you to your 4-up save instead of pushing you to your invuln. It would just give it a bit more purpose and a bit more protection, and still allow you to keep that cool stratagem, even though a lot of what that stratagem currently does would potentially be baked into the Custodes base rules. The final change that I had been thinking about for the Custodes is not so much of a durability buff per se, but it is a very fluffy, sort of never giving up, always fighting on to the very end style of rule, which I think does fit in quite nicely with the intent and the theme and the name of the Emperor's Chosen ability. And that is, what if, like we saw with the Sacred Rite for the Sisters of Battle, that all Custodes get a version of the Even in Death stratagem put into their rules? It would obviously be amended so that it doesn't just automatically go off, because I think that would be way too powerful, but what if all Custodes had a Astartes Banner style ability where when they died or lost their last wound, on a 4+, they could either shoot or attack one final time before they were removed from the board? I think that would be incredibly fluffy for the finest creations of the Emperor, and would also not make them personally more durable, but would give you that extra little bit of mileage from each of your models in the army, which, to be honest, is almost certainly going to be massively outnumbered. So getting that extra shot or that extra attack or that extra set of attacks really would help you to overcome that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by your opponent. But there we go. That was just a couple of ideas that I had been sort of throwing around in my head, and that I think GW could possibly introduce to the Custodes to make up for the fact that, at least in my opinion, they are almost certainly going to be removing the +1 to your invulnerable save that the Emperor's Chosen currently gives you. So I do think that any one of these would be a nice way to replace that and give the Custodes a bit more durability in 9th edition. But I do also think that in terms of keeping them good value for their points, they are almost certainly going to have to go up to 4 wounds as a base level. But I do think that that improvement to 4 wounds, along with one of these changes that I have just outlined, would make them very decent on the tabletop. I don't know if it would make them, top tier or anything, but I do think that would make them worth their points, and would mean that they could stand up alongside things like the Deathwing Terminators and stand up to the massive amounts of firepower that are now being thrown around in 9th edition. But what do you think? Do you think that the Custodes are going to lose the +1 to their invulnerable saves, or will they be the special only faction to keep their 3-up invulns on their Storm Shield models? And if they do lose that rule, how do you think GW will balance out Custodes' durability to make up for it? Are any of my suggestions along the right track, or can you think of some better ideas instead? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I will catch you later, guys.